Not everyone born into a family truly has a place within it. Some children grow up surrounded by laughter but are never truly heard. Some women are always quietly present, always willing to sacrifice, yet are treated as mere conveniences like functional pieces of the household, nothing more. Eliza Warrick was one of those people. She wasn't a rebel, nor did she demand anything grand. All she ever wanted was a bit of fairness, a simple question of consideration before being assigned yet another responsibility, a small breath of space between the many times she was labeled as the reasonable one. But in her family, kindness was often exploited to the point of depletion, then blamed when it dared to speak up. What seemed like a simple concert, a 3-day retreat for her loved ones, became the final straw, exposing a truth no one expected: that someone as quiet as Eliza would be the first to call things out. This isn't just a story about injustice within a family. It's the journey of a woman once seen as weak, once manipulated, once abandoned in her own home. And in the end, she was the one who rewrote the rules of the game. The phone rang just as Eliza Warrick was in the middle of making a late dinner in her small apartment in Springfield. She let it go to the third ring before picking up, a sinking feeling already taking shape in her chest. "So you finally decided to answer," came her mother Monica's voice, laced with that familiar saccharine reproach, the tone that had always made Eliza feel like an ungrateful child, simply for not doing what the family wanted. "I've been calling you all day." Eliza gripped the phone tighter, a sharp pang blooming in her chest. "I was busy with work," she replied, though they both knew it was a lie. There were no meetings, no urgent deadlines. She simply didn't have the strength for yet another conversation where her voice would be dismissed. "What's the plan for the holidays this year?" her mother asked, her tone already giving away an agenda making Eliza's heart beat faster. "Probably the same as usual," she said cautiously. "Oh, this year we're doing something different," Monica chirped, excitement clear in her voice. Eliza froze. "Different," how Monica responded cheerfully. "Your father and I got 4 tickets to see Bob Dylan 3 nights in a row. 4 tickets." Eliza didn't need to hear more to know she wasn't included. Still, she asked the question anyway. "So, am I going?" "Well, actually, your father, Caleb, Faith, and I will be going." "And you?" "Well," her mother hesitated. "We were hoping you could help with something important." Eliza clenched her other hand. The gut feeling was right. "You mean staying to take care of Grandma for 3 days? Don't make a big deal out of this, Eliza. You've looked after her before, haven't you? And besides, it's not like you have other plans." Eliza felt a surge of anger rise, but kept her voice unnervingly calm. "Did you ever plan to ask me, or did you just assume I'd agree?" Monica answered without hesitation. "I figured you wouldn't say no. You're always the reliable daughter, always putting family first." Eliza choked back her frustration. "Mom, I'm an adult. I have the right to choose how I spend my time." "Eliza, don't be selfish. This is a special holiday the whole family's been looking forward to." "Except for me," she replied, the bitterness thick in her throat. "I'm the only one who wasn't asked." "You're ruining the family's plans," Monica hissed just before hanging up. But before she could disconnect, Eliza spoke each word with deliberate clarity. "If you keep treating me like a backup caregiver, don't expect me to come home anymore." Whether her mother heard it or not, Eliza had finally said what she hadn't dared to speak in over 30 years. The dinner sat cold beside her. She sat alone, staring at the kitchen wall. No tears, just a firm, weary resolve. For the first time in her life, she'd reclaimed a small piece of freedom for herself. The phone stayed silent all evening, but around midnight it started buzzing non-stop. Missed calls from her father Douglas flooded in like a worn-out tactic her family always used: wear Eliza down until she gave in. But this time, she let every call go to voicemail. A message from Caleb, her younger brother, appeared short and cold. "Think about what's best for the family." She let out a bitter laugh. The family had never included Eliza. In their household, the idea of sacrificing for the group was always a one-way street, and its destination was always her. She thought of the countless times she had skipped class to take Grandma to appointments, canceled dates to attend Caleb's birthday dinners, or typed final papers on a hospital floor while their parents vacationed in the Berkshires. Every time she pushed back, her mother would sigh. "You've always been the one closest to Grandma. You understand her best." But understanding didn't mean carrying the weight of someone else's entire life. That night, Eliza sat in the dark of her apartment, the only sounds coming from the soft clinks of the heater and the dim hum of the kitchen light. She called Kayla, the one friend who knew all the unspoken corners of her family dynamic. As soon as she heard Eliza's voice, Kayla asked, "It's them again, isn't it?" Eliza nodded, though no one could see. But this time, I said no. There was a pause on the other end, then Kayla whispered, "Good. I'm proud of you. You don't have to carry everything anymore." The simplicity of those words made Eliza's eyes sting. No one had ever said that to her. Not her father, not her mother, and definitely not Caleb. Her family only praised her when she obeyed quietly, and the moment she spoke up, they called it selfish. Kayla continued, "Don't answer. Don't read the messages. You've made your choice. They're just trying to guilt you." Eliza murmured her thanks. When she hung up, she felt lighter. But not even a few minutes later, the phone rang again. It was her father. She took a deep breath, and for the first time in her life, picked up with a steady voice. "Dad, I'm sticking with my decision. I'm not watching Grandma for those 3 days." On the other end, Douglas's voice was calm but cold. "You need to learn to think of others. Family is a responsibility, not a preference." Eliza pressed her lips together. "And respect isn't a favor. It's the bare minimum that everyone deserves, including me." After a few seconds of silence, he said, half conceding, half probing, "Then, could you just stop by that morning? Grandma really wants to see you." Part of Eliza wanted to believe it was genuine, but her instincts told her otherwise. Still, she nodded. "Just that morning. And please don't try to trap me again." She hung up and leaned back in her chair, her heart still heavy. But in that weight there was a sliver of light. She hadn't backed down. Not this time. And maybe never again. About 3 weeks before the concert, on an afternoon as ordinary as any other, Eliza brought Grandma Beatrice her evening medication as usual. But this time, instead of the dazed expression and repeated questions, her grandmother was sitting upright by the window, eyes clear, holding a small notebook in her hand. As soon as Eliza entered, she quickly closed the notebook. Her voice firm, yet warm. "Eliza, can you close the door, please?" Eliza paused, unaccustomed to such sudden lucidity. "Grandma, are you okay?" she asked, still holding the bottle of pills. "Sit down, dear," her grandmother said, patting the chair next to her. When Eliza sat, she took her hand, her eyes sharp and focused. "I'm not senile, Eliza. At least not anymore." In that moment, time seemed to freeze. Eliza didn't know how to react. She was so used to seeing a forgetful woman, one who repeated stories from the day before, sometimes calling her by someone else's name. "But," the doctor said, "after the hip surgery, I really was confused. But only temporarily. I've recovered for months now. I just didn't tell anyone." Eliza gently squeezed her hand, still not fully understanding. "Why?" "Because I wanted to see how everyone would treat me and you when they thought I didn't understand anything." Her grandmother's voice lowered, not angry, not bitter, just deliberate and steady. Eliza was speechless. "They thought I was out of it, so they said everything they truly felt. They didn't know I remembered it all. The evening talks, the complaints, the plan to dump caregiving onto you so they could enjoy their vacation." She opened the drawer beside her and pulled out a folder. "Here's everything I've prepared. I met with a lawyer. I've updated my will, added a new medical evaluation. and evidence. Eliza opened the folder and saw the medical assessment confirming Beatrice was fully mentally competent, along with handwritten notes and a small recording device her grandmother had hidden under her pillow during many family conversations. "You're not the only one they've dismissed," she said, her gaze distant. "So was I. But I have you, and this time I won't let them turn you into a shadow again." Eliza's throat tightened. Her grandmother gripped her hand. "I need your help to carry out the final part of the plan. They think you'll fall into their trap like always. Let them think that. The rest? Leave it to me." For the first time in years, Eliza saw in her grandmother not a frail old woman, but a seasoned, resolute, and profoundly wise woman. And in that moment, under the soft golden light of an autumn afternoon, Eliza understood that she was no longer alone in this fight. She and her grandmother, two women long forgotten, were about to turn the whole game upside down. That morning, Eliza woke up earlier than usual. The air was still chilly. Sunlight filtered softly through the sheer curtains of her small apartment where she lived alone, and yet her heart felt strangely calm. She carefully prepared the things Grandma Beatrice liked: a box of fine black tea, a few packs of cinnamon cookies, audiobooks on historical topics, the kind her grandmother always listened to pass the time, and a fresh set of printed photos from her recent projects. Though she was well aware of the purpose of her visit, Eliza made sure to carry her kindness intact, refusing to let anger distort her nature. She packed everything into her familiar brown leather bag, double-checked Beatrice's medication, and locked the door behind her. On the way to Maplewood, she rolled down the window, letting the wind run through her hair as if to blow away the tension waiting to rise. "It's just a morning visit," she repeated in her head like a mantra. Nothing more. But the moment she pulled up to the cream-colored, steep-roofed house she had grown up in, that peace instantly evaporated. She immediately sensed something was wrong. No cars in the driveway. The living room window was wide open, but there were no voices. No laughter, no smell of coffee or pastries her mother usually made on weekends. Even Caleb's silver SUV, always parked crooked, was nowhere to be seen. Eliza furrowed her brow, stepped out of the car, and clutched the gift bag close. She knocked on the door. After a moment, slow footsteps approached from inside. The door creaked open to reveal Beatrice's aged face, her eyes bright as though she had been waiting. "Eliza," she smiled. "You came." Eliza gave her a gentle hug but couldn't hide the confusion on her face. "Where is everyone?" Beatrice squeezed her hand lightly, her voice surprisingly lucid. "They've left. For the concert." Eliza's heart pounded in her chest. She stepped inside and scanned the room. The dining table still held a few crumbs of bread, the chairs were askew, the kitchen smelled of food gone cold. On the wooden table lay a sheet of paper in her mother's familiar handwriting. "We left at 9 a.m. Grandma has eaten. There are 3 meals in the fridge. Remember to give her medicine at 2 p.m. Emergency numbers are on the fridge. Hope you can help for a few days. Love, Mom." Eliza closed her eyes for a few seconds, trying to keep herself from erupting. She picked up her phone, walked straight into the kitchen, and called her mother. It wasn't until the third attempt that Monica answered, her tone light as air. "Oh, Eliza, you're there." "How's Grandma?" Eliza strained each word, her voice deliberate and sharp. "What were you thinking? I made it clear I was only coming for a morning visit." Monica sighed, her voice curling into that familiar, manipulative softness. "You're the most reliable one, honey. I knew you wouldn't leave Grandma alone." "You were wrong," Eliza cut in. "If you're not back within the hour, I will report this to Adult Protective Services. This is elder abandonment, and you know exactly what that means." Silence from the other end. "We haven't entered the stadium yet." Her mother began now, clearly flustered. "Then turn the car around," Eliza replied, her voice cold as steel. "You have exactly 1 hour. If not, be ready to explain things to a lawyer." Then she hung up, and turned to Beatrice, who was sitting quietly on the sofa, eyes gleaming with readiness. No words were needed, both of them understood. The game had begun. And this time the final pawn had marched straight into the center of the board. When the grandfather clock in the house struck precisely 10 in the morning, Eliza stood up and walked into the kitchen, preparing a cup of tea for Grandma Beatrice and a bowl of soft porridge she usually had mid-morning. The air in the house was unusually quiet, but within that silence was something Eliza had never felt before: control. For the first time, she wasn't following anyone else's plans. Every action this morning, step by step, belonged to her and to her grandmother. As she set the tea tray on the table, Beatrice turned to look at her with eyes that were both tender and unflinchingly firm. "You brought the travel bag, didn't you?" she asked, as if it were the most natural thing. Eliza nodded softly. "It's in the car." Beatrice smiled, her eyes sparkling with a rare mischief. "Good. The Florida coast is waiting for us." From beside her chair, she pulled out a thick envelope already sealed. "Before we leave, there's something I want you to see," she said. Eliza carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a stack of documents: bank records, the deed to a beachfront house in Naples, investment statements, savings accounts, and on top the most recent will, notarized just 2 weeks ago. Every asset down to the last cent was left to Eliza. She froze, her eyes locked on the cold, weighty lines and figures. "Grandma." Her voice wavered. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely," Beatrice replied without hesitation. "You're the only one who stayed, not for money, not for appearances, not for status, but out of real love and responsibility." Eliza looked down at the will. Behind the document was an attachment of email records, handwritten notes, and medical certificates, proving that she had not lost cognitive capacity, contrary to what the rest of the family had claimed, in order to try and seize control of her assets. "They tried to strip me of my autonomy by painting me as senile. They discussed everything right in front of me, thinking I didn't understand a thing." Beatrice poured more tea, her hands steady as if she were firmly holding the reins. "But I remembered everything. And with this will and all the supporting evidence, none of them can overturn it now." Eliza was speechless. She was so used to being left out of every decision, used to enduring, to compromising. She had never imagined that someone, especially someone in the family, would stand up for her and do something that would so drastically shift the balance of power. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't need to say anything," Beatrice said, her voice light but firm like a summer breeze on the sea. "Just know that from this moment forward, your life belongs to you, and no one has the right to take that from you ever again." Eliza nodded, her hand trembling slightly as she held the folder. Somewhere far off in the world, Monica, Douglas, and Caleb still believed they were controlling everything. They had no idea the final card was in the hands of the person they had always seen as the most compliant. And they certainly didn't know that by noon today, the game would be turned upside down forever. On the way to the airport, Eliza didn't say much. Beatrice sat quietly in the passenger seat, holding a small pouch of medication, her eyes gazing out the window. Two women, 2 generations, one who had silently watched her family spiral into a lust for control, and the other who had lived in an exhausting cycle of sacrifices treated as obligations, now sat side by side, preparing to step into a new chapter they had written for themselves. As the plane lifted off from Hartford, Eliza looked down at the shrinking patch of New England beneath the clouds. Behind them, the Warrick family still believed Eliza was watching over Grandma for 3 days, just as they had expected. But the truth was, they had already lost control. They just hadn't realized it yet. As Eliza and Beatrice arrived in Naples, basking in the warm breeze of South Florida and the gentle crashing of waves against the wooden porch of their beachfront house back in Maplewood, Monica returned home in a state of panic. The house was silent. No voices, no Beatrice muttering from the living room, no blaring TV. On the dining table was a handwritten note in fine, neat cursive, Beatrice's own handwriting. "Monica and Douglas." I am not senile. I have left with Eliza. All legal matters regarding my assets have been finalized. Please do not contact me. Mom. Monica nearly collapsed into a chair. Douglas turned pale. Caleb, after reading it, slammed his hand on the table and shouted, "What the hell is this? She's been lucid. How did no one notice?" The answer was simple. They had never truly looked. In their eyes, Beatrice had always been an old woman easy to manipulate, and Eliza the daughter who would always obey. They had assigned roles to others in the way most convenient for themselves and ignored every sign simply because they didn't want to believe in the resistance of those who had stayed silent. The price of that arrogance was now plainly visible, and there was nothing they could do to undo it. While Monica frantically dialed her phone messages, flooded Eliza's screen marked urgent, but she didn't respond. She and Beatrice were sitting on the porch bench, sipping iced tea, Beatrice's hand resting on hers like a calm affirmation. Eliza opened her phone and saw a new status her mother had posted on Facebook. The most disappointing holiday of my life. Some people are willing to abandon their family just to do what they think is right. My mother was confused. I never thought family ties could be so fragile. Below the post were dozens of familiar comments from relatives and friends. "So sad, Monica. Girls these days are so selfish. What's so hard about sacrificing a few days to care for your grandma? Nothing can replace family love." Eliza read them her fingers, calmly taking screenshots of each one. She knew her mother was spinning a new narrative that she was the ungrateful daughter, the one who caused harm. But this time, she wouldn't stay silent. Eliza opened her own profile and typed each word crisp and resolute. "The truth needs to be told. I clearly refused to care for my grandmother during the holiday. My family trapped me so they could vacation, assuming caregiving was my duty. They disregarded my voice, my time, and my right to choose. Family does not equal manipulation. This ends now." She hit post, and in that moment the real storm began. Within just a few hours, Eliza's post began spreading at lightning speed. Her words, filled with quiet fury but never harsh or vindictive, drew readers in as if they were witnessing a story they themselves had once lived. "I was forced to care for my grandmother because I worked remotely too. My family always said, 'You're the only one with free time.' I cried reading this. You're not alone. I said no once and lost my entire extended family because of it." Each share became a testament that Eliza was no longer alone. The truth she exposed not only unveiled how her own family had treated her, but also illuminated the hidden corners of thousands of other stories endured in silence. But with the storm came its other edge. Monica didn't stay quiet. She posted a rebuttal, this time twice as long, dripping with carefully arranged emotion and sorrow. "I am a heartbroken mother. I'm not perfect, but I never imagined my daughter would air our private family matters for the world to judge. I only wanted a peaceful holiday." Eliza's grandmother cried all day. "We only asked her to watch over her for 3 days. Is that so unreasonable?" Her words were swiftly shared by relatives, old friends, even strangers who didn't know the truth, but were quick to side with a hurting mother. Messages flooded in. A cousin commented, "What happened to that sweet girl we used to know? Now she's just chasing attention." A distant aunt sent a direct message. "Your grandmother raised your mom. Aren't you ashamed of yourself?" The judgment, guilt-tripping, and moral lectures poured in like a tidal wave, and Eliza sat in silence, her hands occasionally trembling as she scrolled through the comments. Yet amid it all, it was the words of support from strangers that helped her stay grounded. No one in her family had ever said, "I understand why you're tired," but people she had never met spoke those words with such simple honesty, as if they'd been waiting for someone to finally tell this story. Kayla called Eliza in the middle of the online storm, her voice buzzing with excitement. "You're going viral. Even an elder care advocacy blog shared your post." Eliza laughed, Not a victorious laugh, but one of release. "I didn't write that post to get attention," she said. "I just didn't want to stay silent anymore." On the other end, Kayla was quiet for a moment, then softly replied, "And that's exactly why your words carry so much power." That evening, Eliza turned off all notifications and sat in the living room of the beach house while Beatrice slept soundly in the next room. Outside the window, the ocean gently lapped at the sand. Eliza held a cup of tea, her heart both calm and tense. She knew another wave was coming after the quiet, and just as she expected, the next morning her mother posted again. But this time, it wasn't another accusation, it was an apology. On Monica Warrick's profile was a status Eliza never imagined she'd read from her own mother. "We didn't respect our daughter. We let her carry too much in silence. I'm sorry." Eliza stared at the screen, her heart churning. But she also knew an apology was only the beginning. And that beginning didn't necessarily come from genuine remorse. Eliza did not respond to her mother's public apology. She didn't need words written under the pressure of public backlash. What she needed was genuine acknowledgement, something her family had never offered, not even during her most exhausted moments. For years, they had prioritized their own peace, while all the fractures were pushed onto her to endure silently. That afternoon, as the sunlight tilted across the porch of the beach house, Eliza received an email from her father, Douglas Warrick, written in a tone so familiar it sent chills down her spine. "Eliza, I think the apology post was more than enough. You should reconsider your behavior. Threatening to report us to Adult Protective Services was excessive. We only asked you to help for a few days. Don't bring more shame to the family. From now on, you are no longer welcome at any family gathering." Eliza read the message in silence. While her mother issued a public apology, her father delivered a private sentence to her inbox. They had never truly felt remorse, they simply didn't want to be seen as the bad guys. She called Grandma Beatrice and read the email aloud. On the other end, her grandmother's voice turned cold. "That's enough. This is no longer a family disagreement. This is systematic emotional harassment. We need a lawyer." Eliza hesitated, but her grandmother continued, anchoring her away from doubt. "You've stayed silent for too long. Now it's time to act. Not for revenge, but to protect yourself." The next day, they met with attorney Olivia Morrow at the offices of Morrow and Clark, LLP, a sharp, composed woman whose firm voice suggested every word was carefully measured. After listening to the full story, Olivia paused for a few seconds before saying, "Ms. Warrick, what you've described goes beyond internal conflict. This is prolonged emotional abuse involving coercion and public defamation. We have grounds to send a formal warning letter and, if necessary, pursue a lawsuit for emotional distress and character defamation." Eliza signed the first document with slightly trembling hands, but her heart was steadier than it had ever been. Over the following week, warning letters were sent to Monica, Douglas, and Caleb, along with his wife Faith. One might have expected the letters to silence them, but instead, they ignited an inferno. Monica immediately posted again, this time, a victim-like narrative. "My daughter wants to sue the whole family just because we asked her to help her grandmother for a few days. She doesn't understand a mother's heart." Douglas appeared on social media with scattered comments. "Eliza is mentally unstable. She's twisting everything to gain attention." Caleb and Faith bluntly commented under posts. "She's making it all up. It's complete fiction." Eliza read every line, her face pale. The same people who once called her family were now using their words as weapons against her. She turned to attorney Morrow, who wasn't surprised. "I knew it would get to this point," Olivia said. "But there's no turning back now. We'll take this to court." Eliza nodded. In her eyes, there was no more hesitation, only one certainty remained. This was no longer just a private family matter. This was a battle that needed to end with truth and justice in the full light of day. On the day of the trial, Eliza sat alone in the front row, clutching the file meticulously prepared by attorney Olivia Morrow. No one in her family greeted her. There were no direct gazes, only sideways glances and stiff expressions, twisted with anger and self-inflicted pain. They didn't see a daughter defending her personal boundaries. They saw a traitor daring to shatter the sacred structure they believed their family to be. But Eliza was no longer the girl who swallowed tears and nodded in silence. Today, she had not come to apologize or compromise. She had come to be acknowledged, to be heard for the first time without being interrupted, dismissed, or defined by the role of the dutiful daughter. Attorney Morrow began with a solid argument. This was not a property dispute, but a prolonged pattern of psychological abuse hidden beneath the guise of familial love. Evidence was presented: defamatory social media posts, insulting emails, threatening messages, and audio recordings of the family openly ridiculing Eliza in front of Grandma Beatrice, believing she wouldn't remember a thing. Each detail sliced through the layers of pain that had built up over the years. But the most powerful moment came when Beatrice took the stand. The elderly woman with silver hair and a slow gait but strikingly sharp eyes recounted every act Eliza had done for her, not out of obligation, but out of love. She clearly stated that she had heard every conversation about how the family planned to dump all the responsibility on Eliza, that they deliberately portrayed her as senile to seize control of her assets, and that she was of sound mind when she rewrote her will, to leave everything to the only person who never asked for anything. The courtroom fell silent. Monica bowed her head. Douglas turned red. Caleb squirmed in his seat, and Faith looked away. But it was too late. The court's final ruling was clear. Eliza won the case. The Warrick family was ordered to pay damages for defamation and emotional distress, to issue a public apology using court-approved language, and were legally prohibited from contacting Eliza for 3 years. As the courtroom doors closed behind them, Eliza walked out hand in hand with Beatrice, their fingers interlocked, like an unbreakable vow. Beatrice softly said, "You didn't just protect yourself. You protected the dignity they took from me long ago." The months that followed brought irreversible change. Douglas was forced into early retirement after clients refused to work with him. Monica resigned after losing the board's trust. Caleb and Faith lost their business partners and had to sell the house they once flaunted online. Meanwhile, Eliza bloomed. She moved permanently to Naples, renovated the beach house, enrolled in a creative writing course, and began publishing essays in independent magazines. Beatrice started a small group for elderly people to learn painting and poetry. Each afternoon they sat together on the wooden porch, listening to the waves and sipping tea. Sometimes Eliza thought back to the past years, but instead of bitterness or regret, she felt gratitude. Because from that collapse, she had emerged not just as a survivor, but as someone who had taken full ownership of her life with fierce courage. And that, above all, was the most radiant revenge. Throughout that journey, Eliza didn't just reclaim control of her life, she awakened others who had quietly endured the same pain. Through her resilience and bravery, she proved that family ties should never justify trampling one's self-worth, and that forgiveness only holds meaning when accompanied by real change. Some wounds never fully heal, but from those fractures, the light of freedom and dignity can still break through, stronger and more brilliant than ever. If you've ever felt trapped by the invisible expectations of family, if you've ever sacrificed so much that you lost sight of yourself, remember, you are not alone, and you have the right to speak up. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more honest, moving, and inspiring family stories on our channel. And if you're carrying a story that needs to be told, leave a comment. We're ready to listen.